Ask the Podcast Coach for May 20th, 2023.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. I left you hanging. It's the extended dance version. I'm so busy. Welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, bringing 18 years of podcast experience to the microphone. Over there with how many years of experience?
13, maybe.
13 years from theaverageguy.tv. That is the one and only Jim Cullison. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good to be good. Always good to be good, or be good to be here with you on a Saturday morning.
It's also good to be good.
Sometimes.
I hear.
Goodness is overrated, I think.
And sometimes when I'm bad, I'm very good. Okay. If you have a question, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question, and you will jump right into the video. And if you don't feel like showing your face, you can turn off your camera. That's fine as well, as long as we can hear you. And I'm happy to be here. I'm a little scatterbrained this morning because I'm going to London on Monday.
Yeah.
And I'm doing things like recording 2 episodes. I'm going to be back in time to record. I'm coming back late Friday, I believe. But I'm still like, it's just one of those things when you're gone for multiple days, when you come back, your inbox is just a disaster, even though I'll be checking email and things there. But it's just when you get back, you almost need another, like a couple days just to kind of regroup.
And London's just enough to kind of really mess up your sleep. Like you can you fly overnight, you can kind of get it figured out. But then just about the time you get it figured out over there, you're coming back here. And then you're kind of messed up for a week.
Yeah, it's always going to be fun. But if I end up being very tired,
what'll solve that?
Yeah, that's it.
A little bit of coffee,
a little Java, and of course that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. The great thing about Mark is, number one, he's a podcaster. How cool is that? Because that way you don't have to explain to him what the heck a podcast is. It's like a radio show, but it's not. Blah blah blah. He already gets that, and he's an award-winning graphic artist. He does really good stuff. Don't believe me? Check out Ask the Podcast Coach. Check out School of Podcasting. Check out Podcast Rodeo Show. He's done all of those. And the great thing about it is he will sit down with you. First of all, he's going to go look at what you currently have. He's going to go listen to your podcast because you want your brand to kind of match from the minute they see you to the minute they hear you. You want everything to just kind of gel together for maximum impact. And Mark is going to do that. He's going to sit down with you, and you're not going to get that from some guy on Fiverr. That's, $6, I'll make you a logo. Yeah. Okay. So Mark's a little more than $6, but I'm here to tell you, if you podcast for how many years, Jim? 13?
13.
I got 18. So if you divide the years you do this, it's well worth the money. So podcastbranding.co. Turned into Leah Laporte.
Yeah, you were trying to do a 4-minute commercial there. Big thanks to our friend Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Dan was just on my show. We'll talk about it here on the end. But Dan, thanks for doing what you do. He's up to Chernobyl. We've been talking about that each week. Chernobyl Part 4 is out there. In my show, he talks a little bit about like his audio, the number of things he's been producing lately has gone up, not down. We usually go the other way. We start doing more and then we do less and less and less. Dan's actually picked it up a little bit and has been spending some time trying to streamline his audio and video processing, so to speak. So he's doing more like, a bunch a month instead of just doing the couple that he had been doing. So anyways, check it out, based on a true story podcast.com. And if you want to hear a little bit of commentary on that, he's on Home Gadget Geeks this week.
Nice.
Yeah. He's a great guest. He's a fabulous guest. You get those guests every once in a while and you're just like, he was just a great guest. And so Dan, thanks for coming on.
Craig has the question. I wonder what shows Dave will be in Dave's podcast app.
What are you going to listen to?
You know what? It's one of those things where I've actually went through last night when I was walking around. Number one, I had a large number of shows in my podcast app that haven't put out an episode in years. And I went, this doesn't hurt anything, except when you go to find a podcast and you keep scrolling past 15 dead shows. So I cleaned those out, and I will probably, in all honesty, the one thing I usually I want to listen to, but I don't, are audiobooks. because if I listen to one audiobook, that's like a week's worth of podcast listening. And so I might actually, I started listening to Michelle Obama's audiobook, and I think this is her second book or something like that. It might be maybe even her third. But I heard her on a podcast, heard her on Conan. And anytime I've ever seen her, and I've seen clips, I'm like, you know what? She's pretty cool. I want to learn more about her. And it's funny because Paul Stanley, the lead singer from Kiss, his first book was amazing, and he just threw everybody under the bus. It was quite entertaining. His second book should have been named Stuff That Didn't Make the First Book. It was like, it was okay. It was more about, it was like, and so I kind of, as I'm listening to this book, she's talking a lot about her dad. And I kind of get it. Like, that's part of your story, but like, there's a lot of details about her dad. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of like tuned in to learn about you. And yeah, it's like, so far it's one of those where like I quit listening to it and I don't find myself going, oh, I got to get back to that book. So the one thing I did find out, and this is really cool of them, I'm not going to do that to this book because it's, you know, I have hope. But if you start a book, like I got a book on Audible and it was some sort of hypnotic sleep thing, supposed to help you sleep. And every time I would almost fall asleep, this guy would come on and it would wake me back up. And I was like, okay, this is doing the direct opposite. And so if you go to their help section and Google like return a book, you just go in, they send you to a page, it brings up your library and you go, this one, and they go, okay. And you get your credit back. I was like, how cool is that? So that's kind of fun. I ran over to our good friend Reddit's today. Also, if you are so like Kyle Bondo, I don't know if he's in the chat room today. If you're into narrative style podcasts, they have somebody set up a new narrative style podcasting subreddit. So if that's your jam, and it's interesting because they're like, what we're not talking about in here is podcast growth, microphones, promote. Like, we are here to talk about narrative style podcasting.
What else would you talk about if you're not talking about those things?
Probably soundscaping and, you know, how to record 5 people in a room at the same time. But so we'll get to those questions. But right now we're going to bring Scott on board because he has a question. So Scott, that's kind of fun. Wow. Let's well, for anyone who missed that, Scott had his camera off because we said cameras are, you know.
Oh my God. And we got a Baba Booey.
We did. Thank you very much.
We have not had a Baba Booey in a while. Wow. I'm genuinely shocked. Like, what? Let's talk about this for a second.
Let's talk about girth, shall we?
What is the purpose? Like,
yeah,
what do we achieve with that? Now, okay, no, I understand, like, you know, the what they're trying to do, but
right.
I don't get, like, who watches that, like, in this audience, who would see that and go, oh, I gotta go. Yeah. Like, you know, I don't, it doesn't, that kind of blast advertising, that kind of blast, you know, I just don't get it. Now, apparently it works because people, they keep doing it on these, you know, these kinds of things. So they'll jump in the chat and
you know what that probably is?
I don't get it. I just don't get it.
That's probably Twitch when I think about it. Cause I'm like, who, for anyone who's listening, Scott came on board when he turned on his camera. It was a person making themselves feel really good.
Yeah, it was porn.
Yeah, it was porn.
Yeah, it's porn.
So, and so we're like, okay, but first of all, in about, I don't know, 30 seconds, we'll just push this behind us.
No, I think it's a good question though, because like, how do you deal with this? This does happen if you go live.
Because my brain right now is big time into problem solving. Like, wait, who? Because I'm like, LinkedIn, it's not somebody on Facebook or whatever. Like, where does this go to that somebody would go, oh, cool, let's go. Hey, it's a new phrase, dick roll them, not Rick roll.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And so that was different.
Never gonna give you up. Yeah, never gonna let you go.
Yeah, he was not letting go.
Not giving up and not letting go.
Yeah, and they're saying they don't really think that was an advertisement for anything. Yeah, that's true. But here's this, and this is what Craig brings up. I think it's a bored teenager. Because I mean, did you ever crank call people? We did.
Not really.
Not a lot, but we would you're bored and you're like, you just dial a random number and, do you have St. Albert in a can? You have to let him
Is your
out.
refrigerator
Running, yeah.
Yeah, those kinds of
All the
things.
classics. Yeah.
No. So you think it's more of a shock? See, I don't know. I just don't.
Somebody
get it.
that's bored. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I just don't.
All right.
Okay, so here's what we'll do for the future in case this happens again. When we get a guest at the bottom, I'm going to go into the private chat and ask for their questions.
Yes.
And if they don't respond, we're not going to bring them on. So why don't we?
Yeah.
Why don't we haven't had that? I mean, we haven't had to do that because we've had such great luck with this, but that's yikes.
Yeah, that was like, and then it was the whole thing. Like, my brain is screaming, click the mouse, and I'm too busy going, wait, what?
How do I get rid of this person? How do I?
So what I need to do is when I click on add to whatever, I need to keep my mouse right there so I can click the remove button if needed.
Yeah, let me, before we bring him in, let me.
Well, that was fun. Well, meanwhile, as I mentioned, I was over at Reddit and somebody, hold on a second. I'm going to pause for 2 seconds. Okay, our first question is, and we've seen this before. Somebody's asking for Shure MV7, and that is the USB version of what looks like a Shure SM7B. It's much less expensive. It's a pretty decent mic, and it says, I am breaking my head. So don't do that. Your head is very important. Don't break it. A couple of months ago, I could aggregate sound with 2 MV7 microphones with channels left and right. Now I try to aggregate the 2 microphones and both show up on audio MIDI setup. And in a second, I have a very easy answer for this, but they show up on audio MIDI setup as front center in the input channels. I need help, please. Only one microphone is picking up sound in GarageBand. It wasn't like this a couple of months ago. And my answer to this, unless Jim, you know of one, is if you're going to have 2 people on the same computer, this is why I recommend things like the Samson Q2U, the ATR, because they have USB, but they also have XLR. And I know there's one of the Shure ones has XLR and USB, because if it's just USB, like if you have 2 Blue Yetis and you're going USB, everybody that tries to do this, it's a headache. It might work for a bit, but then I don't know what they did here. But I know in the very early days of podcasting, whatever, it'd almost be like an IP address, but it's not. But the name of the microphone in some cases was identical. Like you'd plug in a microphone and it would say ATR 2100, and then you'd plug in another one and it would say ATR 2100, and it didn't know which one was which, so it would just show one. So my recommendation is, if you're going to have 2 people in the room with you, don't use USB microphones. It just, everybody, when I saw this in Reddit, they're like, yeah, this is just a known issue. 2 USBs are just a headache anyway you cut it. Jim, do you know of any workaround for this?
No, I don't. I agree with you. I'm not a big fan of the USB mic, to be honest. I just don't. I think you get better via XLR. There's better equipment for it. There's better sound for it. You get better options for it. I also like having a few. I'm also not a fan of USB like controlled by the computer only, and that's the way with both USB. That's what you only get. I kind of like physical knobs and those kinds of things. So I always say, Focusrite or whatever you want to go with as an audio. I have a Motu. Whatever you want to do, get that. Use the XLR. Don't stop using USB. It's not a great way to do audio. I don't like it personally.
Yeah, Uncle Marv says the new Pod mic is also XLR and USB, and it's also twice as expensive. They used to be $99, and now it's coming in around $2. It's weird. Mackie came out. They announced something, and this is where I was listening to a podcast this week, and they had a great point. It's very Zig Ziglar, and that is, when you quote, and big giant quotation marks on this one, if you fail at something, you didn't really fail, you just have more experience to tap into to avoid making that same mistake in the future. And that was the point. So Mackie apparently is not watching what Rode is doing. They came out with this thing called the DLZ Creator. It's the same price as the Rodecaster 2, And it's for the person that goes, hey, I like my Rodecaster 2. I just wish it took up more of my desk, because everybody I know says, man, the Rodecaster 2s, like, that's the reason if somebody said, what's my biggest pet peeve with the Rodecaster 2, I would say it takes up really the whole left side of my desk. And this is like 3 inches taller and I think an inch wider. And what's interesting about it, this always gets me when I see a video for a product. I guess there are 2 different types of promos, but this is the, hey, it's fun video. It's nothing about the text. No, it's just like, and I was laughing, and it's interesting now, and it's good, I guess. It is good. But it starts off, and there are 2 people of color making a podcast. I'm like, oh, well, this is cool. Look at them. This guy that they're being inclusive and showing this. And I'm like, but it's interesting because there was only one color on the screen. And I was like, well, that's odd. And sure enough, they start off and there is the 2 people doing a podcast. And then all of a sudden they invite their friends, and one friend is of an Asian persuasion, and the other person is that looks like me. And I was like, there we go. And I just thought it was interesting that I have no idea. That's not really podcasting related, but it was just a thing that I was hoping to hear it say, they didn't even show I don't think they showed the back end besides somebody plugging in a mic. Like, I know nothing about the thing besides it makes lights blink and you and your friends are going to have a blast. Cause at the end they go, welcome to episode 100. And I'm like, that doesn't make me want to buy it. So, but yay, cultural diversity. It's just one of those things I noticed when I looked at that. I was like, well, that's good for them. So I don't know what they're thinking though. Cause I mean, it's pretty, like that's a pretty common complaint about the Rodecaster 2 is that it's too big. Like, it takes up, I don't know anybody that's like, oh, I just, so they came out with something that was bigger. So I was like, that's where, if you're wondering, like, Dave, what were you talking about with failure? I'm like, it's great to learn from your own mistakes. It's really good to learn from somebody else's mistakes. You can avoid them.
But maybe some people want more. They want a larger device than smaller, right? It makes them, Mackie's build quality has always been very, very, very good, right? They pride themselves on that. And maybe they just didn't want to sacrifice the quality to get smaller with what they had there. So,
and I did see a couple screens that had things that looked like it might be a little more music related, which that's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts. I love when people say this is for podcasters, and then there's like 27 features for gamers. And I'm like, okay. And I get that you want as many people to use your product as possible, but and that's it. If you're like, well, think about it. I don't have a problem reading my Rodecaster screen, but if I did, this would be awesome because the screen's 10 inches. So
it's so new. I'm having trouble getting any info on it, even on the website. Like there's not a description out there. There's, I'm on Mackie's website. When I go to the actual unit, the picture's broken on the site.
Oh, wow.
I can't get to it. There's just not a lot of info on it out there. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, listen, if you're a Mackie fan and you've been waiting for something like this may be their first, their first entry into this kind of, into this kind of space. They're a little behind, just to be honest, on it a little bit. And it'd be interesting to see what they do here in the future as far as, listen, they have some small audio devices, right? They do. They've got they've got some of the small ones, but I don't know. I mean, I think there'll be folks who are fans, Mackie fans, who have been asking for something like this, and they'll buy this.
Yeah. I guess Curtis Judd, who's a guy that does really good videos on audio stuff, has a video on his channel. And then, it's the Rodecaster 2 is $699. So DLZ, the Mackie went, what we need is something more expensive. And then Uncle Marv says, I actually am pondering. I love the fact that when you go to click something and then somebody leaves a chat and you click the wrong one. Yeah. But Rodecaster does have the Duo on the way. You can pre-order that right now on B&H, but it's not on Sweetwater yet. And I'm a big Sweetwater fan because A, I like candy, and B, it's the same price, same free shipping, and tech support if you need it. And you're not going to get that from Amazon. So that's here's a good question, Jim. Are you being tempted by any of these devices?
No, not not at all. I had the Mackie Mix. Let's see, Pro FX V2. They're on V3 now. I've destroyed 2 of those.
I was gonna say.
I have one at work. Spilled wine into 2. And I've got one at work. I still have a V2 at work that's just sitting there doing nothing. I probably should sell that thing or give it away or do something with it. But no, I like my Motu and it's fine. I'm not bringing anybody in here to get more audio. I really just need the one channel, and then I run the gaming computer into the second channel so I can get both the Mac and the PC out of my speakers. So that's what works for me. I for a long time I did, I had a mixer on my desk and I spilled wine into it. I've yet to spill wine on the Motu.
Knock on Formica.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's that's one of my goals for June. When I get back from London, get caught up, I want to go through my closet and have Dave's garage sale and get what I can out of this stuff, because it's just gathering dust. And I'm like, you know what? There's hundreds of dollars sitting in there just doing nothing. I have a really nice rower machine in the basement that is gathering dust. There are a lot of things gathering dust. And I was like, you could do a lot of home repair with the equipment sitting in your garage. So
it's good to get rid of it. It's freeing too. You kind of just get stuff out. I was just talking with somebody about this the other day, and I was looking at stuff on my shelf, and it was Dan in the podcast. We were talking about this, and like I got a stack of hard drives that are like 250 meg, or 250 gigs. Sorry, 250 gig drives, 120 gigs. They're not very big. They're not useful for anything anymore. Yet they're still sitting there stacked on my shelf.
Yeah,
and it's like, what am I ever going to use those for? I just need to get rid of them, drive a nail through them or take them, drive a nail through them and take them to a recycling center, just smash them with a hammer, something along those lines, get them recycled. It just feels good, I think, to get rid of some of that technical debt, so to speak, of like, I'm never going to use this thing. And it just keeps getting in the way.
Yeah. That's it. Absolutely. John has the right answer. I should be using the rower. Here's what I'm going to do. I have an Amazon TV, like it was dirt cheap, on my kitchen table. So I'm a big fan of the, what do they call it? Their TV thing, their little stick, Fire TV. And I'm going to see if that thing will pick up Wi-Fi in the basement. If so, because the problem with rowing is it's really boring. Like it's really boring. So, and here's the behind the scenes. Here's the fun thing. When I was copying and pasting all the questions into Podcast Studio Pro, I didn't notice that. Again, here we go with the whole Mac. I have to do Option C, Option V instead of Control. Yeah, yes. I copied and pasted the same question 4 times. So, but I did find one. It's a tech question. And this is one of those things that sounds cool. And it, as always with podcasting, it depends. He says, is there a hosted or non-hosted way to create an infinite loop of sound on one's landing page? For on the homepage, any infinite loop from a few minutes of up to 8 or 9 hours long. Geez, perhaps with an on-off button, as long as it is on and the page is open, it plays forever. And people are giving, there's things you can do in HTML. So apparently the answer is yes, you can do that. But my thing is, in general, unless things have changed in web design, having something autoplay when you show up is deeply frowned upon, because all of a sudden, if you're in an office that actually works in the office,
right,
all of a sudden, Steve in Cubicle 6 goes to your website and your big spooky sound music comes on. Whoa, like everybody knows Steve is not working on the Weenus report. It's like, all right,
Well, yeah, you don't, but there may be a case where you want that people are going to land on the page and they're expecting it to play. I'm always, I got 1,000 tabs open. So I'm always trying to find, okay, where did that open? Like, where's that sound coming from? It is not an expected outcome. There are some players, I think, too, that you can download that you can put them in, and then you can, in the code, set the play to auto, and it'll just come on. So just be careful with that. I mean, if that's what you want to do and you're okay with that experience, there's some players you can do it, or you can do it in code.
Yeah. This is a feature. This has got me scratching my head a little bit. I'm like, the what? But Randy's asking, is having auto mix a really big advantage of the Rodecaster Pro 2? And I'm like, auto mix? Do you mean that it gets because I know I get my separate tracks. So right now I'm recording me, I'm recording Jim. I'm for some reason have my channel. So if I want to play sounds from my second computer, I could do that. And I have our sound pads. So I will get 4 tracks, and then I will get a mixed down version of that. Where that comes in handy is if I actually pay attention to our levels as we do this. In theory, I can take that stereo mix and put it out. It's good to go. If there was no dog barkings, if everybody's EQ was fine, we have to do any of that. That comes in handy. But I'm not sure what auto mix is. I need to go look that up. Apparently, John is saying some of the reviewers think it really is. So that's cool. I've never heard. It's probably one of those things that I'll go, oh, I always called that like stereo mix. It's just it. So close proximity guess, I think. It's the Mackie, not the Rodecaster. Thank you, Greg. So auto mix is a Mackie thing. Well,
it auto levels. So it's always mixing for you to get the right kind of levels.
That could be handy, because I did see in the, hey, we're having fun in the basement making our podcast video, where there is, much like the Rodecaster, you can say, look, I don't need all the bells and whistles. Give me the easy version of this. And it'll give you, super easy, one button kind of probably features on that. And then you can go advanced. So like with the Rodecaster, I think if you have it set on easy, you can just say like more bass, more treble, whatever. And then if you go, I want the advanced, then they give you the actual graphic equalizer or whatever it is. So it's probably something of that nature. But auto mixing would be good. I know usually anytime I see something with that, which is good, it's better than recording it too loud. It's usually a little too soft. Like, oh, I would have boosted this by another 3 dB. But if it's clean, who cares? Right? But it's always one of those like, yeah, it's not going up to -12 or -6. It's way down. But so it should be, we'll see. I'll be happy. I was really surprised when I went to the page on Sweetwater. They had a video. I was like, oh, cool. And it wasn't the, hey, we're having fun in the basement video. And instead it was like a commercial for Sweetwater. And I was like, my guess is that's just a placeholder until they get the actual, we're having fun in the basement video. But it should be fun. But Greg says, mixed levels real time, and you define which mics has a priority. Okay. So what that is, you can do this on the Rodecaster, where I can turn on a ducking feature. So if it's 4 of us and I'm the moderator, I can have it set that I'm the big shot smarty pants. And if we're all talking over each other, it will automatically duck everybody else. That could come in handy. Or, I don't know, don't talk over each other.
Yeah, well, and you always get into trouble with these kinds of things where then when you start having problems, you've got a whole algorithm to troubleshoot.
Right.
And you probably don't maybe you get some controls over the algorithm, and then you get some weird sounds, and you're always trying to get the, like, okay, where's the ghost in the machine on this one? And how is this working here and there? I don't, ducking has had limited success. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. Google Hangouts used it. We have some of it being used on us right now because we're allowing StreamYard to kind of check us on that. But there's moments where it doesn't work really well. And, you kind of go, wouldn't just raw sound be better? And yet, there's some cases when it's working really well when you don't notice it. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to turn my sound over to an auto mixer, so to speak.
Yeah,
I guess I'd have to hear it. I'd have to hear it.
yeah, and I know in Hindenburg there's a way where you can highlight two tracks and kind of make it figures out which one is supposed to be. You know, anytime you're using that our good friend AI, it still needs some tweaking. So, if it works, great. If it doesn't, don't. Uncle Marv says ducking is hit or miss for me. Sometimes it ducks, and when I don't want it to. Yes. Oh, here's the thing. Last week, John from Metal Mayhem ROC, we got together later, and here's something that I don't know why, but it's true. But if you're trying to play anything on the sound pads on Zoom and you're using a Rodecaster, so you go, oh man, I can't believe that. Yeah, that won't come through on Zoom. We sat there and troubleshoot that because he had things. He's like, are you hearing that? And because we were on Zoom, and I'm like, no. He goes, okay. And then I played some stuff. I'm like, can you hear it? And he's like, no. But he could hear me. And so like that's, and we're troubleshooting, and I'm going into the Rodecaster and I'm playing with the routing, and this nothing. And so then I said, hold on, let's troubleshoot, right? When you troubleshoot, let's take the same setting and change one thing. So I sent him a Google Meet. We went to Google Meet, and I said, John, can you hear this? And he goes, absolutely. And I'm like, it's a Zoom thing. I don't know what it is, because it's weird, because all these sounds go out through whatever my audio is set to. If I go in here to my audio in StreamYard, it's set to Rodecaster Pro 2 chat. And when in theory, all the sounds of this are going out through that. So why it doesn't hear the pads? And then I Googled it, and I'm like, well, this. And everybody was like, I don't know. I don't have an answer. So if you're going to be, and I guess on one hand, I see it as a no harm, no foul, because I guess unless you're doing an interview and you suddenly want to play a quote or something to somebody, because to me, I'm like, okay, these pads on the right-hand side are made for people that are streaming live. You're trying to do your show live. But I guess if you were using Zoom to record you and a co-host, and you wanted to play them a clip, and you go to play the clip, and all of a sudden,
and as it turns out, there can be a lot of
you're ready to comment on the clip, and your co-host is like, I can't hear a thing you're doing. So if you're battling the I can't hear my sound pads on a Rodecaster, apparently that's a problem, and apparently it's a Zoom thing. So that was very, very strange. So, but again, anytime you're troubleshooting, change one thing at a time. And so we'd gone through cables, we'd gone through routing, and I'm like, maybe it's Zoom. And I was like, well, I don't know. So that's it. So keep that in mind. So John's got a new topic here. He says, thanks for tuning me on to Podcast Studio Pro. Yes, it's a cool tool. Let me, can I share my screen when I only have one screen? If I do this, yes, I can. So here is what podcast, and this is what I told Jim. I said, hey, these are the questions we're going to answer today. And if you see here, they're all the same thing. I didn't realize. I was just copying and pasting and going back to Reddit and copying and pasting, and you'll notice these are all the same question. So if I wanted to say do this one, and this is why I like this tool. When I double click on these little squares, they are gigantic, and it makes it really easy to read. And so it's a free software. If you go to podcaststudiopro.com, and this one says comments. I wish listeners could comment on episodes or dislike them. Okay. I understand why they can't. I haven't received much feedback from Twitter or Facebook. We should talk about Twitter here in a second. How do you guys get feedback via email? So, Jim, any thoughts on that, on feedback?
Ask me that question again. Sorry, I was looking at podcast.
The Studio Pro. Yeah, this guy's just basically saying in a nutshell, he was hoping people could, I guess, comment on comments. Let's bring that back up. It was, I understand. Oh, wait. I wish listeners could comment on episodes or like or dislike them. So he's trying to get YouTube on his website. And I'm going to say, if you're on WordPress, there's got to be a vote script, but realize anytime any voting script you buy or use, anytime there's voting involved, it's hackable. I'm here to tell you. See, I understand why they can't, but I haven't received much feedback from Twitter or Facebook. That's a head scratcher right there. I mean, depending on what you're doing, how do you guys get feedback? Email? And I'm like, yeah, or wherever you are at. I know I was listening to the Black Conference call. April is a Libsyn customer. Really cool show. She's awesome. And her whole thing was go to Instagram. And I was like, you know what? Her show is made for women. Her target audience is probably already on Instagram. Because I said, you do know you don't own Instagram. And she's like, I get a lot of activity there. I'm like, then by all means, don't stop. So that's kind of maybe part of it. If you want people to go to your website and they don't want to go to your website, they want to leave a comment on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I prefer to have everything on something I control. But in the end, what happens, I see a lot of people do this. They're like, hey, after talking about something for 20 minutes, tell me what you think. That's kind of an open-ended question and sometimes that will work, but more, I see Michael Hyatt used to do this really good. He would come up and go, have you ever been in a workplace and your boss was a jerk? Like he'd come up with a really specific question and then say exactly how to go to whatever, michaelhyatt.com/question or whatever it was. So he asked a very specific question and gave explicit directions on how to get there. So which just kind of boils down to kind of make it easy and make it specific. I don't know, Jim, do you guys get a lot of feedback on your shows at Gallup?
You would think we would get more. We don't get as much as we do get some. Mostly comes in through YouTube. I get from our community, I get a lot of feedback. They send me emails personally, or they'll send me a note on Facebook. I think here's what I've learned, and everybody's got to kind of come to this in their own way. But I don't know if I really want feedback. I mean, I say I do, but when I get it, I fight it. Or when I get it, I try to explain it away. Or when sometimes you get that feedback and you're like, you're out of touch. Like, this is not what I'm looking for at all. And I think the people who are really good at getting and taking and getting more are those who respond to it in a positive way all the time. That sounds easy. I don't think it is. I think for most of us, we fight our own feedback cycles, which is why we're not good at getting it. We don't respond to it in a timely manner. We don't want to be out there all the time because you want to catch people when they're giving you feedback, especially on Facebook or Twitter. You want to be fairly fast about it. You want to catch it in the moment, which means you need to be available and watching your social feeds all the time.
Yeah.
And the ones who are best at it don't have a life outside of their own channel. In fact, and they don't last very long. They get a couple years in and then they're like, I need a break, right? So I think this elusive feedback thing is one, it is a skill of being good at getting it and giving it back, to people who are giving you stuff. Two, I think it takes a lot of work that I think a lot of people aren't really necessarily ready to give it. They're just not ready to do it. They think they are. And because they think, Dave, the feedback's going to be positive all the time. And 9 out of 10 times it's negative. And then they're like, well, then you go into a comment battle with somebody. Well, I'm not gonna. If you do that publicly, that sends out a big red flag warning, like my shirt, like this guy's dangerous. Don't comment with him. He's going to fight you on it. She's going to fight you on it. Then people who are watching, because by the way, everybody's watching. Everyone's watching you.
Yeah.
They're watching you do this. You don't think they're all watching. In our big Facebook groups, I have so many stalkers. That's the wrong word to use. They're lurkers. They're out there. Yeah. They don't comment, but they're reading, and I'll meet them sometime, and they're like, I can't believe so-and-so said this. And I'm like, well, why didn't you comment on that then? Well, no, they're never going to comment. They're waiting for me to comment, right? So I think it's way harder than we think. I think most people don't really want it. They say they do, but when they get it, they abuse it. or they don't cultivate it, or they don't want to, right? They think it's going to be all great and positive, and it's just not.
Yeah, I think some of it might be based on your audience. I get not a lot, but when I get feedback, much of it is through email. And then I get like Patrick Keller from the Big Seance loves to hit me up on Facebook, and he'll be like, dude, that made me spit out my coffee or whatever. So I get a few people that know me on Facebook will do that. So I try to do that. But yeah, if you make a great point, if you set your phone to notify you every time somebody does everything you'll go nuts. It'll just ting, 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 ting. And then, like you said, 80% of it is going to be, oh, that's not what I thought it was. That's not what I thought it was.
Well, you go to help somebody and they bite your hand off, right? And you're like, hey, I was just trying to help. And then in the process, you get defensive. And then, this is your online persona. So somebody's like, well, I'm not going to ask that Dave Jackson. He just bites my head off every time, or he tells me not to do it, or whatever, fill in the blank. Right?
Yeah. The Jacking Around show, the challenge is getting constructive criticism. I tell people, tell me what I don't want to hear so I can improve. And the key to that is when you say that, shut up.
Yeah.
So if I go to Jim and I go, hey, Jim, thanks so much for listening, but what do you wish I would change about the show? And it gets awkward. And then eventually they go, well, Dad, first they'll go, well, no, I love the show. It's like, I think you're great. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And in some cases they just can't take it. Like, okay, if I think of something, I'll let you know. But in some cases, if you let that little awkward pause grow, they'll like, well, the time I had somebody who said, I liked it because of my podcast stories. They're great. I just don't want them at the beginning.
Yeah.
And they're like, the title said such and such. And she goes, I always end up fast forwarding through those because I'm really excited about your title. And she goes, and I know you try to keep them quick and they're short and everything like that. She goes, but you could, for me, she goes, I'm just letting you know, I fast forward through those, even though I like them when I don't fast forward, but your title is what got me to click. And then you're like, hey, we'll get to that right after this because of my podcast story. And I'm like, that is phenomenal feedback, so,
well, to Jacking Around's comment, it says the challenge is getting constructive criticism. That's not the challenge is not on them; it's on you.
Yeah,
like you're asking for feedback, right? You can't demand like, oh, I just wish this was constructive. No, you're going to get it all because people don't know how to give feedback for the most part. They don't. They're and by the way, all emails are read from a negative point of view. And so you're going to get that email from them and you're not going to take the time to really consume it. I want to throw you this challenge. And this is maybe me talking to me, but maybe it relates to you as well. Take an email and read it and then read it again. Then take a few minutes, think about it, then read it again. Because I can't tell you how many times I've started an email. I've read the first 3 sentences. I hit respond or reply, and I already start typing. And then I send it, and then I go back to the email. I'm like, oh, that's not what they asked for at all. Like I didn't really, we talk about these, listening to respond, these phases of listening, right? These skills in listening to respond, listening to understand. I think some of us are not even listening enough to respond at times, and we're just hit reply again. I'm talking to me, and we hit reply, and then I would be better served in this feedback area if I really let the feedback sit for a few minutes, let it come in, read it, set it aside for a few minutes, come back to it, read it again, because we get all hot and bothered, or we just fly off the handle. And we're like, did you? Yeah, no wonder nobody sends you feedback. You respond back angry, right?
Yeah, that's
I do, not you, but I do.
Well, that's a lesson I've learned. I got kicked out of a band once because this guy blind carbon copied a whole bunch of people on a message, and that drives me nuts because it's so, and it's, I don't know. He actually knew he was doing it, but it's just anyway. And I just went off on him, and I've learned that if I'm really upset about something, do not click send. But going back to the reading something twice. Yeah. Working in tech support, for those of you that remember Crystal, there are times when I still hear her voice. She worked at Libsyn, and when I was starting there, she's like, investigate, investigate, investigate. She goes, and then reply. Because there are many times when you will read the same thing. You start reading the first 3 sentences and you're like, oh, this is one of those tickets. And the minute you jump to a conclusion, there's a chance you're going to jump to the wrong one. And there are times when, if we can't get somebody fixed, the solution is to, like, hold on, let's scroll to the bottom of the ticket and reread their first response. Like, what are they really asking for here? And it's funny. There are times when you're like, oh, well, we're trying to solve a problem that they don't have. They asked about this, and it's just a case we didn't read it. So absolutely read it multiple times and make sure you get that. And it is, we're easy to jump to conclusions. And
well, and at the end of the statement there, Jacking Around says, a challenge. He says the challenge is getting constructive criticism, right? Again, not necessarily their challenge, but ours. Right. He says, I tell people, tell me what I don't want to hear so I can improve. Trust me, if you're going to do that, you better slow down on your responses.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get some, all right, I've opened the door. I'm going to be like Dave Jackson. The picture on all your social sites is you with black hair. And now you don't look that way. And you're going to start, and then, you're going to have to find, and again, I'm talking to myself here. You're going to have to find ways to be gracious in your response to that feedback.
And if you're doing this is from my days of, one of my titles many moons ago was customer service rep, and I would go out and put out fires. And if you're doing this in person with somebody, open your phone and say, hey, can you do me a favor? I really want to make my show as best as it can be. So can you do me a favor? Can you talk about the show like I'm not in the room? And then your body language should be this: I'm ready to take notes. Mm-hmm. And this says your words are important. And so when they start talking and you start making notes, and then when you're done, is like Jim said, don't start defending yourself. Really, the first thing you should say is that all? Is there anything else? And then just keep doing it. And then when they're done, thank you so much for your feedback. It's really valuable. I'm going to ponder on this for a bit. And thank you for helping me make my show. It's hard because, somebody's telling you your baby is ugly. And I'm
so bad at it, Dave. I am I say these things only from experience, because I have done some things where people have, I remember we were taking some feedback from, we'd put a focus group together, and we brought them in on a Zoom call, and we were like, okay, we want to hear your feedback. And so someone had given us some very critical feedback, and I started trying to justify it. And behind the scenes, my one of my coworkers sends me this note. He says, yeah, don't do that. It's like, stop doing that. Like, just listen. And it's really hard to do that.
So is your first response like Randy's? Are you kidding me?
No, it's a little gentler than, I get that, Randy.
Yeah.
It's a little gentler than that. I always say, yeah, but that's usually how I do it. Yeah, but you have to understand. Like, no. Okay, they're never going to give me feedback again if I say, yeah, but you need to understand. Just say, I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Write that down. Like you said, write it down.
Yeah.
Listen to it. Because going toe-to-toe with them, like, they don't want to go toe-to-toe with you. They just want to give you some feedback. And most of us aren't good at listening to it.
Well, number one, it makes them feel heard. And what I found, this is kind of customer service 101, but if you ever have somebody who's really upset with you, including your spouse, let them go. Don't interrupt. Dude, just because here's the thing. I was in a class once, and it was really bizarre. I was a beta student, and it was all about leadership and things like that. And we were talking about, dealing with upset customers, and they gave us a pillow and a tennis racket. And they said, okay, at the count of 3, we want you to beat that pillow. And they actually had us think about something that makes you really angry. Think about your dad or whatever it is that makes you upset, and blah, 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 and really channel to where you're really stressed out. And they're like, okay, now at the count of 3, beat that pillow like it's whoever or whatever is making you upset. And at first you're going crazy, but you lose steam. Yeah. You can't keep up that intensity. So if somebody's really upset and you show that you're listening, and again, this works really good with spouses, the steam will come out, and then you can maybe hopefully have a conversation if you don't start off with, yeah, but that's not good. But it's it is an art to accept constructive criticism. And I would even say, I like the thing, talk about it, tell me things I don't want to hear, talk about it like I'm not in the room. But it might be, I would ask somebody, hey, I like that. Tell me what I don't want to hear. But even that is like, ask me for negative things. I would ask, give me some feedback on the show, both good and bad or something. Because really there, I guess in a way I get his point. He's looking for things. What can I fix? But on the other hand, if you get some notes, shall we say, if we take the Hollywood note, they gave me a few notes. If you ask for feedback, and the first one is, man, I love it, you're so entertaining and blah, blah, blah. And then they go, oh, and by the way, that cat interrupting your show was driving me crazy. It might be a little easier to accept the bad if you get a little good with that. That would be my only thing, maybe, to, if that is, it might make it easier. I said easier, not easy. That might be something to think about it. Craig's got a great quote. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen twice as much as we speak. The good old Stephen Covey line, strive to understand before being understood. Man, that, boy, if I'd followed that one. Yeah, anyway.
This is hitting too close to home.
It is. Yeah. Meanwhile, let me go back over to Reddit and find. Yikes. Well, here's a fun question. And apparently this person is from Texas. It says episode idea, and he says, hello, I have some ideas, but I'm wondering if y'all would have some better ones. We want to record an episode where I'm giving some top 5 lists, and my wife has to put them in order, kind of like a game for us to play. I've got some ideas about which list to use, but I'm interested to compare against y'all's. And so people were throwing out things like your top 5 pizza toppings, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess when it comes to ideas, this is just something you got to kind of throw on the wall. And I'm not sure, like somebody said, top 5 pizza idea. I'm like, if I don't know who you are and you're not, I don't know, insert celebrity here, Johnny Depp, somebody that you would want to, Ed Sheeran, like I might care maybe if I was a 13-year-old girl, what Ed Sheeran's top 5 pizza toppings were. But the list would have to be something. And here's the hard part is, like, I don't know. If we said here, what are the top 5 podcasts? I mean, those can be fun. I'll give you an example of somebody who did this well. Is in fact, they just brought it back on YouTube. It's a guy named Eddie Trunk who's got a show on Sirius Satellite Radio. The comedian Jim Norton and some other guy named Jim that I can't think of. He's another comedian. And they had a show on VH1 Classic called That Metal Show. And they've brought it back. I think it's called That Rocks now on YouTube. Same guys. And they would say, rank your top 5 Van Halen albums. And it would be interesting. And you would, in the end, this is not solving world peace by any means, but you would have what do you mean? Van Halen 1 has to be the best one. No, it's a dad. And, so that kind of thing can be interesting. And then what they did, and it was interesting because when they did their show on VH1, they could kind of go, what do you guys think by applause? Now they're doing it on YouTube and they call it Shout It Out Loud because it's a Kiss thing. And they're like, all right, time for you guys. Shout it out loud. What do you guys think? And they've got the chat and they're reading it right there. Oh, it needs to be this and it is that. So that might be better than, I don't know. I guess if you had, because to me, the pizza topping thing, I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. I don't know. Thoughts on this one, Jim?
Yeah, no, it's a good that this area of engagement and doing these kinds of things to the audience. And you're right. Like if you're not famous, you don't, it doesn't carry as much weight on pizza toppings unless you've built this podcast around a relationship. Like you and your spouse are doing this podcast and you've attracted other married couples and you've got a big audience of that. And they tell you all the time, we love it when you guys discuss this thing. Then I think you got a really good segment in there. I think creating a podcast just to do lists every week of couples, not sure that necessarily does it. Maybe, I don't know. It's a chicken and the egg. I don't know. If it's interesting, it will attract people. If you can bring them in and hold them, you've got interesting content. If you can make it work, do it. I don't. It's like Dave. It's like any content idea. It depends on who you are and can you pull it off? Can you make it
Interesting.
make it work? Yeah. No, exactly. Listen, you and I, if we started quizzing each other on the top 5 pizza toppings on this show, people would be like, "What are you guys doing?"
Yeah.
However, if it was super funny and it became a thing to the listeners, like, sometimes those things are born out of the show itself, and they don't make any sense to. Well, I mean, we have a few of those, like the whole opening of the show comes out of the way we do things, kind of comes out of the audience understands it because we grew into it. So I don't know. I think I said a lot without saying anything at all.
Well, Todd the Gator says it's the best Van Halen album is Diver Down, to which I'm like, to me, here's the thing. Van Halen 1 is so good in my book, I don't listen to it. I wait until I know we're like, Dave, we're taking a huge tangent. Okay.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
It's so good that I wait till I'm having a bad day so I can put it on and it brings me out. I tell you what, when we come back from talking about our awesome supporters, we're going to answer a question about monetization from Mate Machia. Nope.
Mathematica
Humanista. There we go. I haven't got that far in Duolingo yet, but I'm getting there. But we do want to thank our awesome supporters. If you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, you can see a list of those people there. And if you, that's interesting, want to join the School of Podcasting, this is one of the things Dave did at the last minute. So it'll be fun to see what slides show up here. If you want to join the School of Podcasting, hey, we've got courses, we've got coaching, and a really, really, really awesome community. And of course, unlimited one-on-one coaching. I do have a new thing. Speaking of this isn't unlimited, but if you're like, I don't want to join the School of Podcasting and I want to pick your brain, but I don't want to do it live in front of people and ask the podcast coach, podcastcoaching.com will take you to a place where you can buy X amount of minutes. And it's the cool thing. It's asynchronous coaching. So that's something else I just launched. And our spotlight supporter, which means, yay, Dave has the right slides, is Ed Sullivan over at soniccupcake.com. If you want any kind of audio editing, Jim, I know you talk with Ed a lot.
I do.
And this is a guy that's been playing with audio forever, and he's a good guy and knows a ton. And he will also tell you, don't use 2 USB microphones. So check him out, soniccupcake.com. The only thing about Ed is every time I say his website, I get a little hungry.
It does sound delicious.
And I will say something I found out that I'm sure he is well aware of. If you use the word Sonic in your name, you are up against the hedgehog like nobody's business when you try to find that person. Because I went to Google Images looking for Ed's logo and typed in Sonic Cupcake, and it was nothing but the hedgehog 24/7. I was like, wow. And I was like, that's something you got to think about, I guess, in some cases. So soniccupcake.com. Thanks, Ed, for being an awesome supporter. And Podpage, if you want to try Podpage, go over to trypodpage.com. And probably by the time you hear this, I think it's out now. Brendan is pushing out a new feature. He's got a feature where if you do guests, you can actually have a guest intake form. And what's cool about it is it gathers their bio and their headshot and all that stuff. And then when the episode goes live, you can attach that guest to that episode. And he's now giving you the ability to add custom questions. So if you wanted to actually ask them something before they come on board, that is now being added to Podpage. So check it out at trypodpage.com. If you want more Jim Cullison, well, go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And we're still on our journey to 100. Last week we had 32. This week we have, that's right, 32. So we're on the journey to 100 awesome supporters. If you want to help bump that number up a little bit, you can join for as little as $5 a month. Go to, again, askthepodcastcoach.com podcast.com/awesome. So thanks to all those.
What could we do that would entice them to join? Like, hey, when we hit 50 awesome supporters, you and I will chat room, throw those.
Yeah.
Or if you're on YouTube, throw them in the comments down below. What would it be clean, please?
I was going to say, unless you're Scott, I don't want to.
After I still have a little PTSD.
I do.
Scott.
Yeah.
Whew, that one took a while to get over.
If somebody came in the chat room, if somebody went to askthepodcastcoach.com/question right now, I would be like, I need that sound effect of re. I'm like, I'm a little.
No, I'm going to vet them. We're going to get them vetted from here on out. By the way, I agree with you. Van Halen 1. I went back and looked while you were talking, compared Van Halen 2 to Van Halen 1. And you're right. Listen, Van Halen 2's got some.
Oh man, come on. You're No Good.
Yeah.
Out of Love. Somebody get me a doctor. That's got a killer solo. They're all good. Van Halen 1 and 2. It's like Therapy. 3. Women and Children First. Yeah. I'm a big Diamond Dave fan. So those years were the soundtrack to my childhood. He said, frantically looking for the David Lee Roth sound effect that he can't find. Oh,
Woo!
here. Yes.
Woo! Woo!
Yeah. So, anyway, so here is the question. It says, Dave and Jim, I have a podcast, and since its beginning, I have stressed that all my content would be free. Unfortunately, I have to change that. Any advice on how telling my community the change? So, the thing my knee-jerk reaction is, I'm going to be using Daniel as a great example of this. Daniel had a little baby boy, and unfortunately, as things do, his marriage kind of crumbled as much as he really tried to make that bad boy work. So at one point, Daniel was like, hey, I got to go be a dad. So I'm going to be gone for a while. And he was gone for years. He put out a couple things, but for the most part, he was done. And I don't know anybody. I've talked to him, and like everybody was like, hey, go raise your kid. And so without, you don't have to give that many details. I mean, I have people, one of the reasons our patrons are down from where they used to be is people just put, my financial situation has changed. And I'm not like, oh, come on. What do you mean? It's 17 cents a day. No, I'm like, I get that. Your financial thing has changed. So if you just say, the fun part is, for the record, somebody's not going to be happy about this. That's just the way it is. But on the other hand, and those people aren't really your fans in my book. I don't know, Jim, I could ramble on this. Well, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think you got to be careful, especially if you've made some brand promises, right? Brand in the generic sense. Like you said, hey, like if you said, we'll always be free, and then you're not. Well, you made a brand promise. So you better come up with a way to have something that's still free. Like create, listen, it's tough. This is why you don't want to give away everything in the beginning. Like most people think like, oh yeah, you give 100% away for free in the beginning. And no, you hold some back, because eventually you need to charge for this kind of stuff, right?
You could do the Mark Maron. Mark Maron's, all of his stuff is free. I think the last, if I remember right, it's the last 50 episodes are free. And once that 51st episode comes out, the oldest one goes behind a paywall. So it's still free.
Right.
But if you want the back catalog, the thing to keep in mind, said the guy who wrote the book, Profit from Your Podcast, Proven Strategies to Turn Listeners into a Livelihood, available at profitfromyourpodcast.com. And nobody wants me to say this, and yet I still do. It takes somewhere between 2 to 3 years to grow an audience if you're really good. And B, 3% of your audience is going to pay for stuff. And nobody wants me to say that, but it's kind of true. The show Radio Lab was trying to get up to 1%. When I interviewed the people from Teachable, she said 2%, and the people I interviewed, most of them were around 3%. So feel free to prove me wrong and blast it in at 10% or 5%. But if you're thinking, if I could get 50% of my audience to give me $5, yeah, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm saying it's probably not going to happen, because when I opened the School of Podcasting, that's what I did. I did 2 problems. I I made it so low, it was $5 a month. And my friend said, do you know of anything of value that you can buy on the internet for $5? And I went, no. And he goes, exactly. So I have a problem right now because I've offered unlimited one-on-one consulting and people go, oh, that can't be any good. Because I mean, that guy charges, hundreds of dollars an hour. Why would he give it away? And the answer is because I love to do coaching. And so instead of knocking on doors, when I was doing coaching and trying to sell that as a product, I still do. If you want to do, again, podcast, what did I say it was? Podcastcoaching.com. I would end up answering a lot of free questions to have somebody, finally hire me for 15 minutes. I'll answer a couple more questions and I never see them again. And I was like, I'd rather take that feature that I love to do and apply it to people who are going to stick around a while. But monetization is tricky. It really is. I know Todd was saying, when Todd Cochran, when he, I think he said when he wrote a book, no, when he first started taking ads. So he started free. Everything was, just Todd talking about over at, oh my God, what is Todd's tech show? Geek News
Central.
Geek News Central. Thank you. And when he brought on a sponsor, people are like, oh, you sell out?
Yeah.
Dude, it's your art, man. So
I don't want to listen to an ad.
Yeah. Now, so if you explain this as, hey, I started this show X amount of years ago, and I've always said things are going to be free,
or just make the change. Like, this is the other thing.
Yeah.
Just make the change. You're going to lose a whole bunch of people, but you got to be okay with that. And you're going to take a dip. They say sometimes you're going to take a haircut.
Yeah.
Right. In that. And then grow an audience. You're going to have to come back to a new audience, because the old audience came because you were free. Now you're not free. You'll convert some of them, not many, but you'll convert some of them. Now you need to go find people who are willing to pay for this content, and you got to be willing to let those people go. And that's the hard part, right? You have a couple thousand or whatever, and then you get down to 50 or 25, and you're like, oh my gosh, nobody likes me. Yeah, nobody at the moment. That's probably true, right? But you'll win some. You got to go win some people back.
Yeah, and then there are times that, like Matthew Passy, who is the podcastconsultant.com. Some other guy has podcastconsultant.com. But he just sold his podcast editing business. Why? Because he said, well, I know he has little twins and he wants to go watch his kids grow up. Yeah. And it's like, so, there are times when you're like, well, I could either charge for this, or because I've got to either do this or that, or if it's taking to, there are times when you're like, well, or I could just quit doing the show. There are a lot of things you can do. If you're thinking about quitting your show, cut back on the schedule. If it's, 3 times a week, maybe once a week, maybe twice a month. I don't know that I would go less than once a month. Or this is the other one. I don't know why everybody thinks it's probably Joe Rogan, that people think the show has to be an hour or 40 minutes. I'm like, you can do a 10-minute podcast. I do one, podcastconsultant.com. So that's another thing if it's taking up too much time. But if just the goal is, and that's where the ways you make money, the easiest, the most profitable one, sell your own stuff. Number 2, affiliate. If you have the right product for the right group, affiliates can really be handy. Then you get into crowdfunding. Notice I didn't jump to ads yet, because I see people that are just crushing it. If you have to be good with crowdfunding. Then you get into ads, and there are host-read ads, which, somewhere, and I hate the CPM model, the whole $25 per 1,000 downloads, because again, that only works for about 10% of podcasters. So I always say, if you are going to do ads, don't do CPM, charge per episode, and look at your niche. The more niche it is, the more you can go. And then you get into programmatic ads. It said the guy in the Libsyn shirt. So I will just do this for now. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of programmatic ads. I really am. It's one of those things I don't want to know. I really don't want to know what Libsyn is paying for, or I should say AdvertiseCast is paying for programmatic ads. Because any time I see anything, when I did my research for the book, I was using Voxnest and they were paying me $1.70. Now I've heard Todd say on his show, it's somewhere around $3 to $5 per 1,000 downloads. And for me, only me. Some people $5 per thousand, they'll take it. For me, I'm like, no, thank you.
One thing I do want to say is they say I thought about asking for donations, but I think it wouldn't work. Don't take yourself out of the game before you've even tried it. So that may be a good next step to offer something, donations, Patreon, something along those lines. Now you think about the value you can add to those donations. Hey, if you do this, I'll do that. We'll add this value. Or hey, because in the early days, I had somebody contact me and say, hey, I want to give a donation. And I'm like, well, I don't take donations. They were like, what? Like, what's your PayPal? I'm going to send it to you. I mean, they felt really strongly about donating to the program. I've seen it also work on the tech side of things where those donations then go towards things. Like, I think Randy did this in his podcast for a while. It got him his Rodecaster Pro. So you can start people along those lines of adding value for particular items or for particular things. So don't rule yourself out. Don't say, I don't think donations will work. Well, try it before you do it. It may work. It may not. It's okay. Failure will confirm that, this thing didn't work. But
remember when Mark was talking about how he just asked at the end of one of his shows, Mark from podcastbranding.co, and he just said, hey, if you found value in this episode, if you wouldn't mind, giving some of that back, go to whatever his website was.com. I just, as a joke right now, put super chat anyone. We're on YouTube every week. I think we've gotten 2 super chats because we don't really talk about those much, mainly because Google takes 60%, something ridiculous. It's a lot. But you have to ask. If you're going to do that, you have to ask slowly, specifically, and confidently. Don't do the whole hey, if maybe want to kind of donate, I don't know, go ahead. Okay, thanks, bye. Our website.com. No. Yeah. You gotta say, hey, thanks so much for listening. This show is listener supported. If you're listening to this not live, you'll hear me at the very beginning of the show say, this show is listener supported. If you find any value in the show after listening to the show, do consider being an awesome supporter. And that's it. You can't blow your domain name like I just did at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. I hear everybody do this. They'll go, and if you want to do it, all you have to do is go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. No, askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and become an awesome supporter today. So you don't have to do it in a pukey radio voice, but you have to do it slowly and specifically, and you have to do it more than once if you're going to do it. And then when people sign up, like when people come awesome supporters, we always play lots of loud music and talk about their website and make a big deal about it. And if you're doing kind of a Patreon thing, Captivate came out with a feature this week where you can do membership sites, and it's slick, said the guy in the Libsyn shirt. But I can't. Cool is cool, and it was cool. And I told the guys at Glow, I'm like, guys, we got competition, and he made it to where they have one feature where you could say it's for ads. You could say when you buy this, you get a pre and post roll and a mid roll, and there's only one in stock. And again, this is where you charge what you're worth, and there's only one. So if somebody buys that, when you go to their page where all the stuff to buy is, it says sold out, which is kind of cool. And you can have multiple levels and stickers and the whole 9 yards. But again, keep in mind, you have to ask it. And DR says, when you say do it more than once, do you mean in the same episode? No, well, that wouldn't hurt, but yet that can get annoying. Exactly the face that Jim is making right now. I just heard, I won't say who it was, but a podcaster I really like, and he has dynamic ads, and I heard the exact same ad twice. And I was not back to back, but I heard it in a mid roll, and then I heard it like 30 minutes later, and I'm like, okay, whatever.
We were listening the other night. We were enjoying a libation on the deck, and we put on Pandora radio. And man, Pandora has gotten horrible with ads. Like they're the YouTube of ads, right? Yeah. And so we were just getting all these commercials. And I can't tell you, there was a few I heard in the 2 hours we were out there. I heard several times, and you kind of, I don't know if that's good. Like, I don't know. So definitely host read. No, mention it. Maybe. I mean, sometimes I mention HelloFresh or I mention Nespresso. Those are both affiliate sponsors for Home Gadget Geeks. And and I work those. Now, I do them every week though, because consistency matters. And you got to plant that thought in their mind. I always tell people, stop drinking bad coffee. Like, you can easily make it with Nespresso. We say that all the time. I want them to remember the next time they have a bad cup of coffee, they go, I just need to buy that stupid machine, and I'm going to use Jim's code to get it taken care of. We've had, I don't know, I've had a dozen people do that on the podcast.
Yeah.
Dave, I did affiliate for Coinbase back in the heyday of crypto. And man, I didn't realize how many of those until my taxes came in, and I was doing my taxes last year, and I'm like, holy crap, I sold a lot of these things.
Yeah, what's this 1099 for? Wait, what?
What the? I didn't realize, and so I think, yes, add it, do it once, don't repeat the ad.
Yeah, because DR said, would that count as 2 CTAs? Well, if I told you right now that DR's question is brought to you by Mark at podcastbranding.co, would you want to hear this ad again about how great Mark is? He's got a thing in podcastbranding.co, podcastbranding.co. He's great. It's Mark. He's Canadian. Hey, he's polite. Go over to podcast. I mean, I count that as 2 calls to action. It's one, it's like the person that takes 37 boxes of cookies to the express lane that says 12 lines, 12 items only. You're like, it's 1 item, cookies, don't so
that's really common in what we could have sponsored questions, but you that's really common in sports. Our Nebraska football team, that touchdown sponsored by Touchdown Pharmaceuticals. If you're having trouble, we'll get you a touchdown.
Welcome. You know what that music means? It's Saturday morning. It's time live from the School of Podcasting Studios.
Yes.
We could do all that stuff. This question brought to you by, we do that. Hey, that's the first field goal of the quarter, brought to you by, So our first porn Baba Boo today was brought to you by our good friend Dan over at Based on a True Story podcast. Yeah, and I don't know about you. Do you like it when they do that? Do you like it when they put a sponsor on the 50-yard line? They're just, for me, especially sports. Oh my God, NASCAR.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's okay. When it's subtle, when it's subtle, I don't know. It makes the world go round. How can you? I mean,
I said the word Sweetwater today, so there will be a link in the episode description for Sweetwater today, because I'm an affiliate, or you can go to supportthishow.com/Sweetwater. Since we're talking monetization,
what if you did a show where every word was sponsored? Everything you did.
Sweetwater Lipson Squadcast. Yeah, that would be just
this question. This answer.
This answer brought to you by. That's right. We'll do that next week.
Yeah.
Randy Cantrell from the Yale Studio down in Fort Worth. Speaking of monetization, has anyone experienced a paying sponsor trying to influence content? Ooh, that's one of the reasons why. There are 2 things.
For sure.
Yeah, I've not had this. I haven't. I have felt weird. Like, let's say somebody approached me and they were really good at designing websites. Like, Mark's a friend of mine. It would be weird having another sponsor that was a competitor to Mark. You know what I mean? Or if I'm...
Yeah, if you're going to listen in advertising, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to have, think about a TV show. They don't care if they'll show Ford and Chevy, not maybe next to each other, but at different breaks. So yeah, I've heard you say this before, and I don't know if it's as important as you make it sometimes. Like in other words, Mark sponsors the beginning. Could we have another graphic designer? What if another Dan kind of does, but what if another graphic, or it was in the same boat, also sponsored the mug? Would you feel uncomfortable about them being back to back in the show?
I guess maybe not as much. It is weird. Like, I'll give you a great example. I know Deidre from Cap Show, which is right now the Cadillac of AI podcast tools. And there are, if we probably during the recording of this episode, 4 more AI tools have come out.
Yes.
And people are going to ask me which one's the best. And I'm like, I haven't played with Capsho 2.0. I understand it's the bomb. But when I see that AppSumo one for Cast Magic, I'm like, man, for the money, that's a tough one. Now, it may not do all the bells and whistles. I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm over the AI stuff because they are handy. I'm just like, every time I hear a new one, I'm like, ugh, it's the same thing. But one thing before we move off of Randy's thing, he has a great point. Randy says part of his sponsorship agreement states sponsors have no content approval. So that's something to like, I've never thought about it, but that's a good thing to have in there because, you don't want, I know with some affiliate stuff, they'll have in their terms, and you can't have like Google AdWords for the product name because they don't want to have to compete against you, that kind of thing. So if you're using Google AdWords to, do people still use Google AdWords to, or Facebook advertising or whatever? Then, they don't want to have to be competing against you because you're trying to do that to get people to do your affiliate thing. So, yeah, so it's tricky with that. But the thing I was talking to somebody earlier in the week about advertising, and they said, how much is too much ads? And I said, well, for me, I said the benchmark is radio is 30% ads. So 20 minutes an hour is pretty much ads on radio. And I said, now that is not the benchmark to aim for. I go, that is the benchmark to run away from. And I said, there are a lot of things like Jordan Harbinger does, I think 3 or 4 sponsor breaks on his Feedback Friday. He usually does one ad, and Jordan is really good at making them very personable and very, not like haha funny, but I remember when he had one, it was some sort of cream and his wife was pregnant. And he said, Jen right now is like 8.5 months pregnant and this and this and that. So she uses this cream and it's great and it's awesome and blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of cool because you got a little behind the scenes, kind of made it a story. It wasn't just, hey, this cream has this stuff in it that does this and your skin is great, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't so much of just like a LinkedIn bio of here's the facts. It was more of a story than an ad. So he does a good job of ad reads. So that's another thing. If you're just doing, I heard one on Podcasting 2.0 that it was an ad for AdWiz, and it sounded like somebody trying to give an example of how to be monotone. And they dropped it in like it was an interview, and I didn't even notice it. And I swear, I'm not making this up. This woman talked like this, like she was reading something, and it was so good. Thank you, Jim, for that question. That is a good question. And I was like, you got to be, I'm like, is this a spoof? And they're like, no, that's an actual ad. And the beauty of it was on a podcast about advertising. And I was like, so don't do that. Don't do monotone ads. So I get ads. I think it's a stream of income that some people can do. And, if you're hyper niche, you might end up with a great product that really fits your audience and all that stuff. But there's a part of me that I just hear ads that are too loud. They don't fit. They're in really weird places that just, they drop them in the middle of a sentence. And for me, I get it. Somebody's trying to make some money, but maybe it's weird. I still think of podcasting as a young medium. And I'm like, if we just reproduce radio, there's a reason people came to podcasting. It's because radio sucks. At least it does in Akron, Ohio. It's horrible. And so if we make it sound just like radio, it'll be interesting. Then maybe the indie podcasters who don't get the sponsors will end up getting more popular. Because here's the thing, is the writer strike still going on? I haven't watched
I think so.
Yeah, that's a bonus for podcasters because I could watch a rerun of, there was a horrible show. Well, horrible to me. Mayim, that girl, I can never say her name, Mayim Blalik. She had something about something cat. And I watched 2 episodes and I was like, yep, not the target audience for that. So we could watch a rerun of that, or you could go listen to, Home Gadget Geeks and learn about or whatever. So, so because Legacy Zach says, is the age of advertising stranglehold nearly over and the age of subscription podcast expansion on the rise? Could be, because again, Captivate just rolled out a way to do that. And they have a lot of features. I mean, I could do a whole thing on that. They have it where you set up where you could say, hey, the membership, they're basically kicking Patreon to the curb. You can have things early. You can all sorts of stuff. There's a video. I'll put in a link in the show notes at askthepodcastcoach.com/437. And so it'll be.
I don't think so. By the way, to answer that question, no, they'll always both coexist together. Yep. Because you have people who are willing to pay for things and people that aren't. Those are the two kinds of people there are. And so, there are people who will just listen to ads because they don't want to pay for it. And there are people who don't want to listen to ads, so they'll pay for it. And so absolutely. they'll exist. They'll always exist together.
Well, and I'm working on an episode for the School of Podcasting where I'm looking at my numbers of shows that I've launched, because people always go, is this good? I got this many downloads. Yeah. And so I went back and looked at like the future of podcasting and your podcast consultant to show you. And number one, your podcast growth looks like this, just squiggly lines up and down. And it kind of goes up and you're like, well, and then it will literally nosedive for no reason. And then it'll bound back up. And then it's really crazy that way. But in doing that, I looked at how many Satoshis I had. And to make a long story short, right now, and again, Satoshi is a very, very, very small amount of Bitcoin. So it's like a penny in Bitcoin. I have $75 now in cryptocurrency. So nice. I was like, oh, that doesn't suck. And I don't plan on, that's like my retirement fund. I'm not spending any of that money. I'm just going to put it aside. And if it ends up doing that, but I'll put a link to a video if you want to set your show up to receive Bitcoin, even if you're not going to do anything with it, or if you don't know what a Bitcoin is. There are people that will listen, and they like Fountain, the new Fountain app. Well, it's not new, but they just came out in a new version. By default, has 10 sats per minute, which is like probably half a penny, something like that. But it's better than a poke in the eye. As we get ready to wrap up here, one last question from Randy. The dumb question is there are no dumb questions. How many podcasts do I currently record? Too many. I've got Ask the Podcast Coach. I've got Your Podcast Consultant, which is twice a month, and it's less than 10 minutes. So that's that. I do Podcast Rodeo Show. When I get paid, we do the Podcast Review Show. Am I missing anything?
School of Podcasting.
Oh, School of Podcasting. Yeah, that one. Yeah, there's 5. I want to start doing more Building a Better Dave, and that's just Dave rambling into a microphone. And then once a quarter, I might put out a Logical Weight Loss podcast. So that's 7, but really it's 5 in the 5 ones. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm doing an experiment in June, and I'm going to do the cool kids call it a feed drop. And so what I'm going to do is on Wednesdays, put one of my other shows that's not the School of Podcasting, but is podcast related into the School of Podcasting. So I'm going to say, hey, this is me promoting my other stuff. If you didn't know, I do a show called Ask the Podcast Coach. If you want free podcast consulting, wake up at 10:30 on Saturday. Here's a great episode, or maybe I'll do a sample of something. Maybe I won't do a whole 90 minutes. Blah, blah, blah. Here it is. Here's a sample of Ask the Podcast Coach. And so I'm going to do feed drops to see what that does to my other shows. Because I've had people go, I didn't know you do like other stuff. And I'm like, powerofpodcasting.com is where you can find all my stuff. So that's coming up as well, but it is too many. Oh, and I also forgot number 6, the future of podcasting. And I talked to Daniel. I go, should we go bi-weekly?
What about the Podcasters Roundtable?
That is on hiatus.
Okay.
Ray's father unfortunately passed away, and he circled the drain there for a while. I don't know what he had, but it was not fun, and it took a while. So that's why we took a hiatus, because Ray had to help, and now he's passed away. So it's one of those things where we probably should come back. And it might just be, Ray's kid is probably 8 now, something crazy. Mm-hmm. So I need to touch base with him, because I missed that show. It was always fun to do. But yeah, so that's that one was easy. That one, no prep. I showed up and talked. That was my favorite kind of podcast. So, but Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
I mentioned it earlier, Dan Lefebvre is on from Based on a True Story podcast, and we spent some time talking about AI and audio editing, and some video in there as well, a little Descript and some things in Adobe Premiere and some of that kind of fun stuff. So even for podcasters, this might be one you go and listen to. And then at the end, I talk about this solar generator that I picked up. I mentioned it last week on the show, but I picked it up. It's already had 2 fails, so we'll see how it goes. I don't talk about it there, but a little bit of talk a little bit about it. HomeGadgetGeeks.com.
Yeah, and on the School of Podcasting, I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to be talking about a couple of things, really, but I'm going to be sharing my numbers on a launch that I did, and it's kind of funny because when you promote your podcast, it turns out it grows, and when you don't, it doesn't. And I saw that in many different ways on that. So that's coming up on the School of Podcasting. But I'm also going to talk about that there are other ways to measure your podcast than downloads. I mean, yes, it's easy to see what's working and what's not. So that'll be coming up on the School of Podcasting. Next week on Ask the Podcast Coach, Dave will be talking about his trip to England. That'll be fun because who knows what kind of shape I'm going to be
in. Good stories. Lots of good stories.
So, but I'm going to get to see Craig. That's what I seriously like. The highlight of the trip is when I see Craig. I'm looking forward to that. And I think I'm going to run into Mark Asquith and Toby from the Pro thing from Blueberry. So all the UK people. So I'm looking forward to it. So if you're coming to that show, definitely come to the Libsyn booth and say howdy. But we'll be here next week, tired and jet lag, but I'll be here. So thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.